All right, so this Knife Thoughts video is going to be on this knife, and this is the Jack Wolf Knives Cyborg Jack. And first of all, as always, thank you to Ben for sending this one to me for review. I've really loved getting to check out all of these Jack Wolf knives, and this one no less so. Also, make sure you are subscribed to the channel if you like knife videos. I have a lot of them and have a lot coming. So make sure you're subscribed, click the bell and select all so you know when I post new videos, and check out my other social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Knife Thoughts, and my website knifethoughts.com, where I post articles on knives like this and knife related topics. But moving on to the knife, if you've watched my other videos on Jack Wolf knives, I have always done them where first I talk about the pattern that inspired the knife, like a sway back on the laid back jack, or a Coke bottle on the vampire jack. But on this knife, that is a little bit more difficult. So I'm going to kind of talk less so, I think, about the history of a pattern and more about what I think is the influences behind this knife, because it's a lot more, I guess, modern, particularly in the handle, than the previous Jack Wolf knives models have been. So what do I mean by that? Well, these type of straight lines and angular shapes on the bolsters and handle are not something that you really see in traditional knives very often. You see more rounded corners and edges, or just kind of flat lines like on the bolsters here. So it's pretty unusual when comparing it to vintage patterns, and that's something that Jack Wolf Knives has always done really well, in my opinion, which is make modern slip joints that are really clearly influenced by vintage patterns. So it was interesting to see this knife where, again, at least the handle, it was not quite the same idea. Now, of course, there are a lot of modern slip joints that don't really take a lot of influence from vintage patterns, but it's something that I enjoy on the Jack Wolf knives. So I wasn't sure what to think of this one at first, but when you open this knife up, you see that the blade is actually relatively traditional, or quite traditional. This is a pretty classic Turkish clip point style clip point. Now, there are a lot more of this type of clip point, I would say, in custom knives that have come out in the last 20-ish years than there are in the vintage catalogs from the late 1800s and early 1900s. But it's definitely a blade shape that has been around in traditional slip joints. So it's kind of interesting to see this dichotomy between the blade and the handle, with the blade being pretty traditional looking and then the handle being pretty non-traditional. And at first, my reaction was, I almost wish that the blade was as non-traditional as the handle. So I was thinking something along the lines of a really modern clip point where it came straight out like this, and then instead of a swooping clip, kind of a straight clip, and instead of a swooping belly, almost like a Tonto style blade. And I do think that that would look really cool on this style of handle. But the more I looked at this knife, the more I thought of it as a Cyborg. So it's called the Cyborg jacket. The tube, which if you would like to see the tube in packaging, it is in my unboxing video. As always, it has super cool tube art. It comes with a nice microfiber cloth, a very nice leather sheath, a sticker, and a pog. So you can definitely go check that video out if you are interested in seeing those. But it is called the Cyborg Jack, and I started to realize that it's kind of like a cyborg. So what do I mean by that? Well, there's the modern futuristic of the machine in the handle here with this shape, and then there's the traditional kind of biological natural in the blade. So it's really interesting. I did talk to Ben about his kind of inspiration for this knife. And he said actually it started out with the blade. So he had this idea for what he thought was a really, really cool clip point blade style, and he designed that first, and then from there added on this handle. And I don't know that he had the same idea as I have of the blade being kind of a traditional, classic, kind of biological, the man part of the Cyborg, and then the handle being the new, the futuristic, the machine part of the Cyborg. But that's how I kind of see it. And so I think it's interesting to think about it like that. He started with the classic, and then as the knife came into fruition, it became more futuristic, like kind of like a Cyborg. But as I was saying, there's some themes of like the Terminator and things like that in the packaging, and I kind of picture like, you know, in the Terminator where you can, you know, see the normal human features on one side of the face, and then the machine underneath on the other side of the face. So that's kind of how I am picturing this knife, or how I am thematically categorizing this knife, is it's a mix of the traditional and the modern. But if I had to say what pattern I think this is this most resembles and is influenced by, I would say a back pocket trapper. So what that is, it's a large single bladed trapper, usually with a curved handle and a little bit more of a Turkish style clip point like this. And unfortunately, I don't currently have one to show you, but it would be something like the classic case trapper mixed with a queen hunter. So obviously the hunter is very, very big, but a back pocket usually is a little closer in size to this, but with some of the features of the queen hunter. So that's what I kind of would say it most resembles, if you're a real stickler for categorizing these as, you know, influenced by a traditional pattern. But speaking of other knives, I want to show you a couple size comparisons, because one thing, as I've gotten these Jack Wolf knives, I've always kind of thought that they were all the same size roughly, except for the Little Bro Jack. And it turns out, as I put them into my case, that's not the case. So again, the laid back Jack, this is a sway back. You can see it's definitely smaller. It's definitely shorter than the Cyborg Jack. The blade, definitely smaller. But then if you get what I believe is the biggest of the Jack Wolf knives so far, the Benny's clip, the Benny's clip is definitely bigger. So you can see that it's got maybe another 1/4 inch, something like that. And the blade, same deal, definitely a little longer. Also, when I first saw the Cyborg Jack, I thought the blade was actually really similar to the Benny's clip, but you can see that it's not at all. I don't really know why I thought that. The Benny's clip has this flat area. The clip, the swoop, is much more abrupt, and it has a different swedge and a more abrupt belly than on the Cyborg Jack. So size comparison there. And then just to show the most recent Jack Wolf knives model, here is the Vampire Jack. Really, really like this one. And you can see that it is just a bit shorter in the handle than, oh, now you can see that it is just a bit shorter in the handle. And then in the blade, it's pretty similar, actually. Definitely a little bit of a different blade to handle ratio on the Vampire Jack. And then finally, the classic Great Eastern Cutlery number 15, a 3.5 inch handled knife, and definitely a little shorter than the Cyborg in both the handle and the blade. So the Cyborg Jack I would call a medium-sized knife. It's something where you can definitely get work done with this knife. I used it for breaking down some cardboard, moving into a new house. You've got a lot of boxes to break down, and it did great with that. As usual, these are ground very, very nice and thinly. So they slice really, really well. Slices through cardboard, great. But I also have used it for food prep a good bit. Again, slices great for that. And just general use. And as always, to be expected, it cuts really well, and with the M390 it holds an edge really well, and it came with a really nice edge also. No issues with blade wrap, so you can see no reflection there, and no blade play, really well centered, pretty much perfect from my perspective. I don't know if it looks like that on the camera, but it's pretty much perfect from, in person. The fitment is really great. I got this orange shred carbon fiber, which is really cool. Like to have seen a little bit more orange in mine. Some of the other ones that I've seen had more orange, but it's kind of the luck of the draw on that. I think most probably do have a little more orange than this. But you can see the fitment is really, really nice between the bolsters. The machining on the bolster is really nice too. I think that you wouldn't be able to have this knife be well made by, some other manufacturer that didn't do such a good job as whoever makes these Jack Wolf knives. And then I want to show you the angles here. So there's an angle right here, but it's perfectly fit. You can see there's no gaps. An angle right here, and then you come down, there's this chamfering. Beautiful, beautiful construction. Really, really nicely done. And as usual, the action is really nice. As usual, also, I think you want to put some oil in these right when you get them. What I have found is after like a day of having it, opening and closing it and such, it gets a little gritty. Just put a little bit of oil. I use mineral oil and it'll smooth right back out. And you can hear that wonderful walk and talk. Really, really nicely done. So as usual, has been come to expect of these Jack Wolf knives, it is a really, really nicely made knife. The one thing that I really like about all of these patterns so far is that it's pinchable. I do like a knife to be pinchable. It makes it easy to use. Grab out of your pocket, pinch it open, cut with it, and go. And speaking of cutting, the handle is really comfortable. I mean, Ben has done a great job of that on all these knives so far. I talked about it on the Vampire Jack, the most recent model. It is way, way more ergonomic than I expected, and so is this. With this angular design, you might think that it wouldn't be ergonomic, but even though it has those angles and straight lines, it still has a nice, classic curve to it, and I can get a full 4-finger grip. 2 of my fingers sit here up on this straight area, and then the bottom 2 sit down here, and it feels great. I didn't have any issue with it in using. So ergonomic, particularly, it's not a whittling knife, so you're not gonna be like going after it. But in my use of cutting cardboard and all that kind of normal stuff, it felt great while cutting. So another really, really nicely made knife from Jack Wolf Knives with what I think is a really interesting design theme from Ben. I don't know if I'm off track with the whole Cyborg thing between the blade and the handle, but it's how I have thought of it. Ben did say that when he was first designing all these knives, he thought that the main people who would be interested in them, who would be buying them, would be traditional knife guys. And while I think a lot of traditional knife people have been buying them, I think that there has been a really, really big and positive reaction from the modern knife community also, which I am not personally surprised by at all. I think the modern knife community has wanted really nicely made slip joints that don't, require you to do a whole bunch of work to get. GEC, right? So I'm not surprised at all that the modern people have been interested in these, but he said he was worried that doing something, a little bit more modern, less based on a traditional pattern, wouldn't go over well when he was first designing them. But now that he has gotten that really positive response from the modern knife crowd, I think that he's more willing to do more kind of modern futuristic designs like this. So I'm looking forward to see what he comes out with. I have some ideas of my own that I might float to him for some cool patterns, but they'd be kind of esoteric, I guess. Not probably the go-to patterns. I said a futuristic cotton sampler would be cool. Maybe a futuristic swing guard. But anyway, I really enjoy it, and I hope you have enjoyed the video. If so, make sure you give it a thumbs up, leave any comments you have, and make sure you check out the description for a link to the dealers that you can get these at. There's a lot of different dealers. A lot of them are great. One that I am an affiliate for is Knife Ship Free. Jay does a great job. Everyone there does a great job. So definitely check them out if you're going to buy one of these. And also Traditional Pocket Knives, C. Reisner Cutlery, Austin. It's a really nice guy, and I have a video about his modern slip joint also, so make sure you check that out. But there's lots of places you can get these, and you can choose from the list in the description. And as always, last but not least, don't forget to go out and do good.